Well, hello, hello, hello. I gotta say, all you poor folks in the UK who've had to stay up so late to see this live, but hey, look at this. Now, hopefully, you're in the comfort of your PJs and chillaxing a little bit, and maybe a nice little fire going or something like that, and here we are. So I'm so excited to be with you. Our Wednesday now day webinar brought to you by NoCD. NoCD, a downloadable app that you can get through Google Play or iOS. Please check us out. You can go to www.nocd.com as well too. Couple of exciting things to talk about today. So of course, really thrilled to be with you, and thanks already for the questions coming in and the appreciations. Everyone loves the song. Paul actually emailed me and said someone wanted the song lyrics because they wanted to tattoo them on themselves. I was like, oh, that's really awesome. All right, so let's get into it. Let's do a couple things. People are spooling in here, so that's so wonderful. And of course, let me know where you're at too. Love to hear where everybody's writing in from as well. So if you're putting in a question, if you could even just add where you're at, it'd be fun to know if you're comfortable with that. You don't have to, not mandatory or anything, but just that. So a couple of things. I mean, hey everyone, holiday season we know can be a stressful time. So one of the things I always like to talk now and then about is the concept of really seeing a licensed therapist, somebody who is really well trained in OCD. And I'll tell you, Stephen Smith, our founder, really kind of exemplifies that type of story, right? Stephen went to several different therapists, 5 of them, I believe it was, before finding somebody who did exposure and response prevention. And I've had the opportunity to sit with Stephen and talk to him about that experience and how just difficult it was, and how advice were things like, man, why don't you put a rubber band on your wrist every time that you have a negative thought? You can snap it, right? There's a picture of him that we even use in some of the webinars we do. He's got all these electrodes on his head. They're trying to figure out brain waves and figure out what's wrong with them. One therapist said, your family's the problem. You should move out of your home. And so he moved away from all of his support people and everything. And I say that because personally, as I'm working with people, it's unfortunate that a lot of people come to me who have seen numerous other providers and have been given, very much kind of a basic type of advice, right? Try not to think of that anymore, or distract yourself, or it's okay to get some kinds of reassurance from people, or it's fine to avoid things. And there's a lot of unfortunate prescription of safety behaviors to a lot of people. So what I want to make sure that we really get across to all of you is, in this time of the year, we know it can be a stressful time of year, right? We know COVID has added to the stressors of the year as well too. And there's even maybe difficulties of, do I leave the house and do I go see my loved ones or not? We missed each other last year. Do I take the risk this year? What about the spike that everyone's talking about after the holidays of things? Is that going to be real or not? And do I get my vaccine or not? And, we're not going political. We're not doing anything here. We're just going to acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of stressors that are out there right now, right? And I want all of you to know that NoCD can help you, right? Can provide you with therapists who are well trained, who are licensed, and who we provide consistent supervision to as well, for cases that anybody might need a help with, and that we want to be there. We want to be your provider of choice for your OCD. So I hope that that's helpful. Number 2, a nice announcement for those of you who are outside of the United States, like in the UK. And one of the reasons we're doing it at this time of the day right now is hello to our UK members. We wanted to be doing this when you were hopefully awake. We're really beginning to work on the process to get health insurance reimbursements outside of the United States. So for any of you who are outside of the US, we're going to offer NoCD therapy for $100 per session this holiday season. So For people in the US already, we're accepting many plans and encourage you to use your health insurance as much as you possibly can to pay for your sessions. But for those of you outside the US, if you sign up by the end of the year for the next 3 months, starting with your first session for 3 months following that, you'll only pay $100 per session. Okay. So I hope that that's really helpful for people, that it will be $100 for you per session if you sign up between now and the end of the year. And for those 3 months, including that first session, have that. And then for the 3 months following that, it will be $100 per session. So I hope that's helpful. Now, you can sign up by doing a couple of things. You can go to www.nocd.com, or if you are in the UK, you can give us a call at, I'm going to give you the number. Ready, everyone? And I'm even going to put it in the comments right here. So as I'm typing it, it's +44 1495 708 766. So that's 44 1495 708 766. And I'm going to put that in the chat. All right. So hope that's helpful, and a nice piece of holiday gift to all of you as well. Let's get into some Q&A. All right. Let's see what we got going. I haven't had a chance to jump on any questions yet, so we're going to go up to the top here, and we'll get working on these things. And again, thanks for joining, everyone. Good to be here. I'm still going to do the tonight one as well too. So it's a double Wednesday webinar day, right? It's like 2 for Tuesday, but it's Wednesday, so it works out. All right. So number one, Sarah says, "Hey, Dr. McGrath, 2-part question, please. How do I deal with the gray areas of OCD when I have less or no anxiety, but other emotions like guilt, shame, fear, sadness, anger, frustration are still so present? I question whether I even have OCD. Intrusive thoughts without anxiety are confusing. I have moments of doubt and sadness. It's so complex. The more I understand my OCD, the more I don't understand it." Well, Sarah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Sarah, because this is one of those points that I think we really want to reinforce. OCD isn't just about feeling anxious or stressed. OCD is also things like guilt and shame and fear and sadness and anger and frustration and so many other really kind of uncomfortable emotions. I personally feel the diagnostic manual got it wrong when they listed that, it's feeling kind of a stress anxiety kind of experience, and really focusing on that, because I think we've missed the boat. OCD does bring about shame and guilt and disgust and frustration and anger and all sorts of other unwanted emotions that people experience. So we shouldn't be limiting OCD to just anxiety. So Sarah, I'm in 100% agreement with you. And I don't even see it as a gray area, Sarah. I see it as an absolutely normal, natural part of OCD, just one that's not talked about or focused on enough. Okay. Now, in terms of questioning whether or not you have OCD, it could be because you're feeling that you're not too anxious about it. You're feeling these other emotions. But to me, those are absolutely valid, legit OCD types of things, just so you know. All right. And it is complex. You're right. And I like what you said at the end. The more I understand about your OCD, the more that you don't understand it. One of the things that, and I was working in some supervision with somebody on this the other day, and then also have recently had some people who have had some existential OCD that I've talked to as well, who talk about the notion of trying to understand things. And I will agree with you that the more we attempt to understand, the more we realize what we don't know, right? And that can be intimidating to a lot of people. And OCD could try to jump on that and say, look at all these things you don't really know. And even more stressors or more guilt or more shame for not knowing all of this kind of stuff. But here's what I really want to get across to you, Sarah, is that we're ultimately never going to understand everything about OCD. And I'm totally fine with not knowing everything about OCD. I've been treating it for 22 years and still learning about it. Okay. So I'm not here to truly understand absolutely 100% everything about OCD. I think I got a pretty darn good handle on it, but I know there's always nuances and things that I'm still going to be learning about it too. The goal really is to be able to recognize that, okay, there's OCD trying to influence something. And guess what? I don't need to let it. I don't need to pay attention to it. I don't need to go down the rabbit hole with it. I don't need to get into a debate with it or a discussion with it. I don't need to ask 10 more people about it to get their opinion about it. I just need to recognize, yep, this sure fits the pattern of what OCD does all the time. I don't think I need to go down this road. I'm going to take the other way. I'm going to do this. Right. In the past, I've always said I'm going to sit with anxiety. I'm changing that, and I'm still working on the language here because I'm so used to saying sit with it, but I'm getting people to live with anxiety and doubt and guilt and shame, and to recognize that those things can be there. And if they are there, that's fine, right? You don't have to let them rule your life. They don't have to define you as a person or anything of that nature whatsoever. You can recognize that the guilt and the shame and the disgust and all those things are a product of OCD, but a product of OCD doesn't have to define you as a person, right? Just because you have a product of something inside of you doesn't mean that it defines you, right? I could eat some chocolate, but I am not defined by the fact that now I have some chocolate in me. I am a person. I am not a bar of chocolate, right? So I'm not defined by all of those types of things that I have inside of me. And if I have OCD, right, it doesn't have to define who I am. It may be a passenger, it may be in the car, right? But there's other passengers in the car too. There could be joy, and there could be interest, right? There could be a sense of curiosity. There could be all sorts of things that are in the car too, in addition to OCD. And I can work on maybe putting my focus and my attention on those other things. And though OCD will always try to poop on the parade, it doesn't mean that I'm going to have to listen to everything it says and believe it to be true. I'll hear it, but I don't have to go with it. So I hope that that's helpful, Sarah. I hope that worked for you. JW says, hello. Why do some obsessions take months to go away, even with doing ERP? That is a great question, JW, and I wish that we knew exactly why some hang on longer than others. I would look at it this way. Your OCD is really latched on to those things and has made the decision that this thing is really, really important. And if you were to lose the OCD, then you might lose all of the monitoring of this thing. And boy, wouldn't that be awful. So think of it like this, JW. I sometimes describe OCD thinks it's being helpful. OCD thinks it's your friend, right? OCD says to you, hey, JW, don't stop thinking about this, or don't get this image out of your head, or recognize, JW, this urge whenever it happens, because it could be dangerous, right? So JW, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to be your eternal watchdog. And I'm going to be constantly telling you when you need to be curious and scared and afraid of all of these various types of things. At JW, you must pay attention to those things at all times. If you don't, JW, something bad or awful or horrible is going to happen. And therefore, don't do anything to try to get rid of me, because I'm actually being helpful to you. Now, JW, could also be that maybe there's some subtle safety behaviors that are going on, some subtle compulsions, maybe even some mental compulsions that are happening that you're not even maybe recognizing that you're doing. So again, working with a licensed therapist can be really helpful in this kind of situations, who has a specialty training in obsessive compulsive disorder. They might be able to really help you figure out what might some of those subtle safety behaviors be, right? And if they help you to figure out what those are, maybe they can also help you to work on eliminating, or at least recognizing them when they're popping up, so that you don't go down the path of what those safety behaviors want you to do. Shelby says, benzoyl withdrawal and OCD. Sure. Benzoyl withdrawal is a thing, right? It can be a dangerous thing, actually, too. I worked with enough psychiatrists to always say, don't just stop taking benzos, right? It could be dangerous. So if you're going to do benzoyl withdrawal, work with a licensed practitioner, a psychiatrist, or whoever your prescriber is for those, on a taper pattern for the benzos. And what I like to do is as you're coming off the benzos to increase the ERP, so that what you're losing maybe from the benzo, you're gaining from the learning that you're getting from the ERP. So I hope that that can be helpful. But yeah, don't play around with benzo withdrawal. Make sure that you're working with a licensed provider. So Angel says, thanks for doing this, Dr. McGrath. Well, I am so happy you're thankful, because I'm thankful too. And hey, it's Thanksgiving here in the US tomorrow. So there's just thanks all over the place. So it's pretty awesome. Ryan says, hey, Ryan. Georgia says, hello, I would like to know what exactly is ERP. ERP is exposure and response prevention therapy. It is the treatment of choice for OCD, and it involves two things. Number one, purposely exposing you to things that are uncomfortable, things that would be the subject of your obsessions, like intrusive thoughts or images or urges that you might experience. And response prevention is helping you to face those intrusive thoughts or images or urges without doing compulsions, right? By purposely putting you into a situation where you're living with the intrusive thought or image or urge, and you're not doing the compulsion. Instead, you're doing the opposite of the compulsion. You're living your life. So if, let's say, an intrusive thought says, I can't drive today because I might hit someone, then I would want you to purposely drive today. And that's doing the opposite of the safety behavior, that compulsion, which says, stay at home, don't get in the car, don't do anything, don't put yourself out there where anything dangerous could potentially occur. Response prevention is what actually teaches you that you can handle the fact that you have an intrusive thought or image or urge, and it doesn't mean anything bad or awful or horrible is going to necessarily happen. Or if it does, that you can handle it far better than you ever gave yourself credit for. My opinion says, anticipation that I will have OCD on Thanksgiving Day and that it will ruin my time with my family getting to me. Help combat that. Well, my opinion, here's what I think. You will have OCD on your Thanksgiving Day because OCD doesn't recognize holidays. All right. So I want everyone to recognize that, right? OCD looks at the calendar and goes, 7 holiday? What? No, there's no holiday. What are you talking? Holidays don't exist. I'm with you on a daily basis. If you take a day off from me, think of all the horrible, awful things that could happen if I'm not there to constantly remind you of all the awful, horrible things that can happen. So my opinion, it's not about having a day without OCD, right? Because you have OCD, my opinion, it's going to be there. It's about recognizing that, you know what? My OCD is going to try to poop on the turkey, and I'm not going to let it happen. I'm not going to allow it to happen. And if it attempts to do it, I'm going to live with it. And I'm going to recognize, wait a minute. Remember what Dr. McGrath said yesterday in that webinar about exposure and response prevention? This is time for me to do response prevention, because I could sit here and enjoy the time with friends and family and eat this lovely meal together, or I could run away and hide and cry and be shameful of the fact that something popped into my head. And now what an awful, horrible person I am for having had that happen. If we were judged by the fact that things pop into our head, no one would like anybody, right? Because no one is immune to just really interestingly weird or strange or awful or horrible or disgusting or whatever types of things popping in anybody's head. Now, of course, OCD says, yeah, it's fine for everybody else to have those things pop in their head, but it's not fine if I have it. And in fact, I want to be the one person in the world who never has that thing pop in their head. I would like to make sure that it never actually happens to me. Not going to work, right? Not going to work at all. So it's not about not having a thought or image or urge. It's about recognizing that I can just have it, right? And just because I have it doesn't have to mean anything whatsoever. We're about 20 minutes in already. Man, we're flying today. Look at the time just going and going. So reminder to everyone, download the NoCD app at Google Play or iOS. Check out our largest community in the world of people with obsessive compulsive disorder. And if you're looking for help, you can go to the app and hit the My Therapist button. You can go on to www.nocd.com and click on a button to do a free 15-minute call with our care team. And if you're in the UK, feel free to give us a call at +44 1495 708 766. All right, let's see. Kayla, hey Kayla, good to see you. Just wanted to say, hey, happy Thanksgiving. Bye. Kayla, thank you so much. Good to see you on here. Appreciate it. All right. Mariella, I'm hoping I pronounced that right. When writing out your obsessions as part of an ERP homework, okay, is it best to write them out as a fact or as a possibility? For example, I broke a chair versus I may or may not have broken a chair. I like the possibility myself because I like the ambiguity, right? OCD is the doubting disorder. And so I like to write things with some ambiguity so that there can be more doubt played into those types of things. Now, it's not that I wouldn't ever have somebody write down something maybe as a fact, right? It could be I drove today, right? Which is true. But you also will have people who, even if they drove today, will doubt if they drove today. So then you might actually do it as I may or may not have driven today too. It is going to depend on the situation, I think, Mariella. But I do like the doubt piece of it that goes with the may or may not personally, just so you know. Angela, do you have any tips on what to do when OCD tells you this will actually happen? Sure. It seems to bother me a lot more than what it's and other types of intrusive thoughts. Okay. So, Angela, how many times has OCD told you this will actually happen? So that's number one to think about. And for anybody else too, I want all of you to think, has any of you had OCD say to you, this is definitely going to happen? Okay. So let's get a number in our heads. I'll give you a moment to think. All right. Now, how many of those things have actually occurred? It's probably not as many as OCD has said would occur, right? Which means OCD is a liar. Now, are some things going to have happened? Sure. But you know what? Even if you don't have OCD and you think those types of things, some of those things are going to happen as well, too. It's just the nature of the beast. It is the way that it is. Okay. So I want you to remember that. That is the key, right? OCD loves a coincidence. Remember 7 years ago when I told you this might happen? There it is. I knew it. I predicted it. I am the all-knowing, all-seeing thing that knows when things are coming. Coincidence happens, people. Things occur. It is the way that it is. Okay. Just because you think something might actually happen does not mean that it actually will happen, even though OCD tells you that. Or if it does happen, it's probably not going to be to the worst case scenario that OCD ever has, because OCD sure loves the worst case scenario. Let me give you an example. I had a student once who was working with someone, and they were out driving. And this person's biggest fear in the world was they would get into a car accident. So they're out doing their driving, and guess what? They got rear-ended by somebody who was texting and not paying attention to their driving. Well, this person got out of the car. They called the police. They exchanged information. The police wrote the other person a ticket. And then the patient got back in the car and said to my student, that was nowhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be. So OCD builds up these things in our head. The hype that OCD puts on people is ridiculous, right? It's absolutely nuts. It's just this worst case scenario kind of experience. You don't have to believe it to be true. Okay. Just because OCD says something doesn't make it true. I want to repeat that. Just because OCD says something doesn't make it true. But then you might say to me, but Dr. McGrath, what if it were to be true? Well, there is nothing in the world that we couldn't what if. So then all of us should be afraid of everything, if that's the case, because we can all what if anything in the world to our heart's content, right? So is it best for all of us to be afraid of absolutely everything in the world? Or can we live with the fact that our brain's going to give us a what if, but just because it does doesn't mean that we have to go down that rabbit hole of what if with it? Okay. Something to think about. Sidley, why do my harm thoughts not cause me anxiety? And I think they might be true, but even worrying about it doesn't give me anxiety. I almost feel calm. Is this an OCD symptom? Sure, because if any of you ever see me at a conference, ask me for the card in my wallet. I wrote a card in my wallet 17 years ago that says, I hope my parents die tonight. The person I was working with was religious, so I put please God on there. And then I put a 666 on the card as well, too. I'm not at all anxious about it whatsoever, even though I've wished my parents death. So, Sidley, how how awful is it of me that I'm calm about the card, right? Should I be freaking out? Should I be ripping it up? Should I run upstairs right now and get it out of my wallet and say, to hell with you, damn bad card, and burn it or something like that? Or can I have anything pop into my head and be like, yeah, okay. Anytime somebody cuts me off in traffic and I contemplate ramming my car into theirs, how bad of a person am I? And should I not drive anymore? Right? Would that be the thing to do? Or is it okay that we have harm thoughts and they don't bother us? Huh? I think the vast majority of people in the world have harm thoughts that don't bother them, right? But in OCD, that's not acceptable, right? Because in OCD, we have this concept called thought action fusion, that a thought is as bad as an action. Thinking something is just as bad as doing it. If you're thinking it, that must mean that you really want it to happen. And now it probably will because of how much energy and time you put into thinking about it. Well, we're here to destroy this concept of thought action fusion. A thought does not equal an action. We could prove that. I've done this before, but we'll do it again. Everybody stare at your ceiling and for the next 10 seconds, wish for it to collapse on top of you. Go. Why didn't it fall? I didn't do any compulsions or rituals to try to neutralize it. Why didn't it fall? And why wasn't I bothered by it either? Right? Well, you might say, well, if you're wishing harm on yourself, it's okay. It's when it's on other people. Okay, so now I'm going to wish, my wife's here upstairs. I'm going to wish for the ceiling to collapse on her from the upstairs in the next 10 seconds, doing no rituals whatsoever and not be bothered in the slightest by it. And if anyone wants to join in with me on this, please feel free. Wish for a ceiling to collapse on a loved one. Here we go. Heard no crashes or bangs or booms upstairs, so my wish did not cause a problem. So, Sidley, how guilty should I feel right now? Right? Is it okay that I'm calm about this? And is it maybe OCD that puts thoughts into your head that says you're not allowed to be calm about these things? When the reality is, of course you are. Anybody could be calm about any thought that pops in their head. Right? My opinion says, thanks for the song. Oh, good. Well, thanks, my opinion. Let's see. Mallory says, hey, Dr. McGrath, is it possibly cured from OCD while doing ERP, but still at times seeking reassurance? Well, Mallory, number one, I don't personally use the word cure. I talk about, can I have OCD for the rest of my life and not be bothered by it? Sure. Like, for example, I have tinnitus. I'll never be cured of. There's no cure for tinnitus. I'm always going to hear this sound going on in my ear that nobody else in the world is hearing. But what I have done is learn to live with it. I mean, it's louder right now because I'm talking about it, but it's going to fade into the background in a little bit. So I'm fine with the fact that I'm not going to be cured of tinnitus. I've accepted that, but I'm also not going to let it ruin my life or be such a bother to me whatsoever. Your part of your question is, when you say still at times seeking reassurances, what I would just ask is that if you know it's OCD and you're seeking reassurance, why? What is that doing for you? Because what I don't want you to do is leave the door cracked open a little bit for OCD to kind of come back in, right? I'd like to help you shut and slam that door as much as possible and put a couple of padlocks on it as well too. So my concern is just where is that reassurance going to lead you to over time? And I'd like you to continuously work on decreasing that reassurance so that you don't give OCD a chance to resurge. Hope that helps. Nick. Hi, Nick. Nick says, hello. Hello. I've been going through a lot of guilt and shame. I'm reliving the event that I have done, and I am starting to create memories that I don't know if they are real. Am I denying the truth? Nick, sounds to me like what you're talking about goes again on the real event type of OCD. And this is what OCD does, right? Is it tells you things that maybe you forgot about this, maybe this did happen or didn't happen. I can't tell you if you're denying the truth or not because I wasn't there at the event, so I don't know what actually happened. But I also know this is that I don't need to remember every detail of every single thing I've ever done in my life, right? And nor do I. I'm not Mary Lou Henner. I don't have a photographic memory like she does. Fascinating, by the way. Go on YouTube and check it out. She can tell you like every person she's ever met and what day it was and time of the day, and I mean, it's incredible. But I don't have a memory like that, so I don't know that I remember absolutely everything correctly. And does that mean I'm denying the truth? Could it be that my head creates memories and things and fills in things? I suppose. I mean, Elizabeth Loftus showed that is a potential, right? So I have to be content then with the fact that I'll not know that everything that I remember is exactly the way that it happened or if it's 100% true, right? Now, of course, here's where the OCD comes in on that, though. That's not acceptable, right? OCD will say, no, that's not a lot. We have to know exactly what happened at all times about everything, because if we don't, what if then we were involved in something that would be awful or horrible, and we can't deal with that. I treated someone once who had a trauma in her life, early in her life, and by the time she came to see me, she would look at her watch every 2 to 3 seconds to see what time it was, because she wanted to make sure that time hadn't passed that she had missed, right? So if she could see that it was 2 seconds later, and then 2 seconds later, and then 2 seconds later, she knew that she hadn't blacked out and something bad had happened to her. So she believed that without checking her watch, something bad could happen to her and she wouldn't know about it. So I did a unique exposure. So I took a box of tissues and I said, all right, I just want you to walk around the room in a circle. And I'm going to sit in this chair and I want you to walk past me. And every once in a while, when you walk past me, I'm going to tap you on the arm with this box of tissues. And you're going to tell me if it happened or not, but you're not going to look at your watch. And every time she was able to tell me if I did or didn't do something. My microphone. All right, there we go. Sorry, something happened to my mic there for a moment. Let me go back to that. So, in case you didn't hear the answer to that one, my apologies. I had worked with someone who had a trauma, and what had happened was she was afraid something bad would happen if she didn't know the time all the time. And so what I did is I had her walk past me, and I had a box of tissues in my hand. And every once in a while, I would just tap her on the arm as she walked past me, and I would ask her, did I or did I not touch your arm with the tissue box? And without looking at her watch, she could tell me if something had happened or not. So it turned out she didn't need to constantly know the time to know if something bad had happened to her or had not happened to her, right? But OCD kind of can come in and say, oh, you do need to know these things. You have to have all of this information. If you don't, then it would be awful or then it would be horrible, right? So something just to kind of keep in mind there. I hope that helps. Let me jump around a little bit too. So Alicia said she wished for the ceiling to fall on her mom, but she doesn't live with her, so now she's worried that it's happened to her. What a great time for you, Alicia, to sit with response prevention right now, right? To sit with the discomfort of not knowing that, and to allow yourself to recognize that just because your brain tells you that it might have happened didn't mean that it was so very true. And let me just say, Hickam Peace gave me what my absolutely favorite, and this is my Thanksgiving gift. Thank you. He says, thank you, doctor. You explain everything so well. It sounds like you have OCD yourself. The greatest compliment I've ever received from anyone who has OCD is that I can explain OCD to people as if I had OCD, even though I don't have OCD. So I thank you for that. That made my day right there. Good. I'm done. I'm done for the day. I got my great compliment. That was awesome. No, thank you. Thank you so very, very much. All right, let's go back. Let me go back to where we were again. So I don't want to, if I don't have to skip anyone, I want to try to get through all of these as much as I can. So there's the cure. Okay. All right, here we are. Katie says, any advice for self-guided ERP? How to know you're doing the right thing without getting stuck into it as its own obsession and source of rumination? Well, there's great books out there on OCD, right? And some things that can give you some guidance through it as well, too. But I'll tell you this, nothing beats a couple of sessions, at least with a therapist, to make sure that, A, you're really meeting criteria for OCD. A good diagnostic assessment can be really helpful with that. B, someone can really help you set up a great hierarchy so that you know what the kind of ladder that you're going to go and working on. And C, they can kind of guide you through doing some exposures and help you to recognize if maybe there's some subtle safety behavior that's going on or something like that as well too. So, so what I would suggest, Katie, is if you can do that, if you have the ability to do that, it's really, really helpful, I think, to kind of guide you through the experience of making sure that you're doing really, really great ERP. Jennifer says, I ruminate 24/7 about your breathing. What can you tell yourself in your head rather than reassurance? Well, Jennifer, I wonder, do you have to tell yourself anything about your breathing? And Jennifer, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I know we're not doing this live. I can't go back and forth with you, but I want you to think about a couple of things, Jennifer. Jennifer, were there ever a time in your life where you weren't focused on your breathing? And if there was, what were you doing differently then than you are now? And you might say, well, I wasn't thinking about my breathing. Okay, great. So, you know what, Jennifer, that is going to become our goal. How can we get to the point of not thinking about our breathing? But we know that me telling you don't think about your breathing is not going to get you there, because me telling you to not think about your breathing will be like my good friend over here, the pink elephant, right? Because if I tell you don't think of a pink elephant, that's exactly what you're going to think of. You're going to think of a pink elephant. So it is not, Jennifer, telling you not to think about breathing. It might actually be the opposite. It might be, Jennifer, all I want you to do for the next 15, 20 minutes is to think about your breathing. Every single breath that you take, in and out. And don't focus on anything else whatsoever, Jennifer. Only think about your breathing. And what I'll bet, Jennifer, is within a couple of minutes, you're going to think, what do I want for dinner? Oh, no, wait, I'm supposed to be focusing on my breathing. Oh, and then a couple minutes later, I got to pee. Oh, wait, I'm supposed to focus on my breathing and all these. And Jennifer, what you'll recognize is, potentially, if your goal has been to not think about breathing, yeah, it's probably what's leading you to think about breathing. So let's change the goal potentially. And let's get you to have a goal of, well, I might or I might not think about my breathing, right? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But whether I do or don't doesn't really matter. I don't have to care about if I do or don't, right? It doesn't really matter if I think about my breathing or not. It won't change the fact that I'm breathing or not, right? I mean, I'm going to breathe regardless of whether I think about it or not. So can I go back to how I was before when I wasn't thinking about my breathing and be able to sit with the fact that, oh yeah, I'm breathing. And if that pops in my head, the acknowledgement of it and moving on. But hopefully the decrease over time in the focus on it and making it front and center in everything about. So Jennifer, I think in this kind of situation, again, if you have access to talking to a therapist about this, somebody who specializes in ERP and, you know, has access to great training and supervision and everything like that, that we could really be helpful in that kind of situation to get you to move off of constantly thinking about your breathing. Swag Sam's coming in from Seattle, Washington. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Jacob says, does OCD affect people differently? Of course it does, Jacob. It can be in so many, there's so many subtypes of OCD. There's mental compulsions, there's physical compulsions. So there's different types of obsessions that are focused on different things. And there's different ways that people compulse as well too. He says, I know I have OCD, but I seem to not have it near as bad as a lot of others. Yeah. And that's fine. But Jacob, it doesn't mean don't get treatment for it as well too, because I think anybody would kind of say to you, do some work on it now so that it doesn't get worse, right? So Jacob, you can learn some great skills and tools by working with a licensed therapist that can be really helpful to you to overcome even what you consider to be maybe some less effects of OCD than you see other people having, but never hurts to still work on it, right? So, Ryan, thanks for your support of Jennifer there. That's awesome. LMA says, hello, Dr. McGrath. Hello. Wondering how I can stop the rumination. It seems I am giving into compulsions without even realizing you're ruminating. Thanks from Canada. Hello, Canada. I love Canada. I've always felt that I was an honorary Canadian, at least music-wise. Great Big Sea, Rush, fabulous bands. Rush, my favorite band in the world. My little bobbleheads there that you can see on there they are, right over there. So there. And then the one of me in the background watching them from backstage. So, LM, I'm thanks for this. You're giving into compulsions without even realizing you're ruminating. So, LM, what I would want to do is I want to take a look at what are those compulsions that you're giving into, right? And are you considering ruminating a compulsion in this kind of statement? It's hard to tell from your question, but what I would take a look at is really, how can I help you stop doing the compulsions? How can we get response prevention going? And again, that's where I like to work with someone who's got a specialty in ERP, is to make sure that we can design some good response prevention for you. Now, there's multiple ways of potentially doing things like that, right? It could be that if you're not recognizing when you give into a compulsion, but other people are, they just kind of give you a little signal to let you know that they saw a compulsion, right? Or you could track it, right? Apps like the NoCD app could be potentially helpful for something of that nature. Or you could also use a token. Every time that you do a compulsion, you put a token in a jar or something, and it lets you kind of know, all right, here's how many I did today. My target's going to be to do 3 less tomorrow, right? And then maybe a review of the day. What were the ones that I did today? How did I do compulsions today? All right. Now, those stressors are probably going to be there tomorrow too. What can I do differently tomorrow about those stressors than I did today? And then I could practice, right? That could be my homework. I could practice and actually purposely expose myself to those situations with response prevention, so that I'm not so caught off guard or surprised by it tomorrow, but I'm able to allow myself to live with it and not have to do a compulsion about it. So hopefully that would be helpful. I hope that could work for you. Sean says, do half measures during exposure practice, meaning avoidance at a 10 and doing a 6, actually help out at all? Or is only like treating a part of cancer when you really should just cut it all out, i.e. the 10s? Sean, I think that's by person. I have had people who have been very timid about doing any ERP whatsoever, and we've started really low. I've had other people say, okay, I'm ready. So we start kind of in the middle of the hierarchy. And I've had other people said, listen, my personality is not the kind of personality that works up to things. My personality is when I'm ready, I jump in and I do it. I want flooding. I've worked with all people on that spectrum, Sean, and have found that all of them can benefit. So I think that it's behooves you as a therapist to know the people that you're working with, right? And to make sure that you are giving them the experience that they want and kind of guiding them through that experience and helping them in any way that you possibly can. So, Sean, I think it depends on you in some ways, and the relationship that you have with the therapist and the comfort that you have with the therapist to really kind of talk to each other about the fact that, hey, here's how I want to do this, and I want you to support me, right? So I'll turn it back, Sean, to you to say, work with your therapist on what kind of approach fits your personality, and let's see what the two of you can do together to come up with the best thing. Mehmet says, was doing great, not engaging in compulsions, but for the past few days, your struggle with OCD came back to light again. Today, you were hyperventilating just because of the intrusive thoughts. Well, what a great opportunity to introduce potentially some interoceptive exposures. One of the things that I find can be very helpful for physical sensations, especially the fear-based physical sensations like hyperventilating, would be some interoceptive types of exposures. There's a really good book that I like called An End to Panic, which lists all sorts of exercises that people can utilize for these interoceptive exposures. Now, you might say, you've said interoceptive exposure 3 times. What the heck is an interoceptive exposure? And interoceptive exposure is an exposure to the physiological sensations that people feel when they're anxious. So I might do something like run in place, or purposely hyperventilate, or breathe through a straw, or sit in a chair and spin, shake my head back and forth like this, do push-ups, put some heavy weights on my chest or something like that, all to simulate various things that I might experience during a high anxiety or panic kind of situation. So if I don't like getting dizzy, I could spin a little bit in a chair. If I don't like hyperventilating, I can hyperventilate. If I don't like the feeling that my chest is tight, I could put something strong on my chest, a weight on it, or I could do some push-ups to really get that tightness built up in my chest. I'm going to purposely expose myself to things that are uncomfortable in order to learn that I can handle those uncomfortable things. And that's where I think you might benefit, Mehmet, because what you might be seeing now is OCD saying, oh, wait, they were able to kind of overcome us. That sucked. Ooh, what if we added some physical issues as well, too? Maybe that'll get them to be more afraid of us. Okay, let's do that. Let's go to hyperventilating. Let's throw that one in. Let's throw that discomfort into the experience. So don't let OCD's trickery and use of other kind of anxiety-based things get in the way of your life. Challenge those things, too. Emily asks, what books do you recommend for sensory motor OCD? Emily, I don't know of any specifically that are out there for sensory motor OCD itself, but there are some great books that are on OCD that I think are not subtype specific that you could really utilize and be helpful. There's books by John Hirschfield and Shala Nicely. There's some things out there from John Grayson. So I think that you would take a look at some of their work and see what could be helpful to you. Haley Reynolds says, I'm really struggling with false memory. Everything seems like proof it happened, even though I don't have an actual memory. I was in recovery, but now I'm struggling again. How do I work on accepting the uncertainty of not knowing what happened? Haley, I think we've answered this one above, probably from a different person, but hopefully you were able to kind of hear that, although this will be recorded too. But in a synopsis, Haley, there is no way to have 100% memory of something. That's been tested and shown for people as well too. So, Haley, I would ask you this. There's uncertainty that you accept about everything, right? About just getting in a car and driving is accepting uncertainty because you don't know that in the future, I know you're talking here about a memory, but I'm going to go to the future for a minute. You don't know in the future that you won't hit someone with your car. So if you drive, Haley, and you accept that you don't have certainty about the future, then to me, I don't see much difference about being okay with the fact that you don't have certainty about the past as well too. Now, I think it's a trick that our OCD plays on us that says you should have a photographic memory of everything that's ever happened. Nobody does, as far as we know, other than like maybe 10 or 20 people in the world. But it's a amazingly small subset of folks. And statistically, it's so ridiculously low that you would be one of these people that it's not even worth, really focusing much about it. But I talked about Mary Lou Henner being one of them, an actress. She was on the show Taxi, so you can check that out. But Haley, check out the answer I gave earlier. I went pretty in depth in that. So, Mehmet says, I keep telling myself it's a marathon, not a sprint, but it's really exhausting sometimes. Yeah, it is. It's exhausting, right? Treatment is not easy, but I commend all of you for doing it. Oh, wow. 10 minutes left. All right. Well, just a couple of things just to review, and then we'll get to a few more questions before we go. Just a reminder for all of you who are outside of the United States for a holiday special with NoCD. If you sign up with NoCD between now and the end of the year, your first session and all sessions for the 3 months following your first session, for those 3 months following that first session, will only be billed at $100 United States. So hopefully that's helpful. We are continuously working on trying to get coverage through health plans internationally. For those of you in the US, we continue to get more and more people credentialed and on plans here in the US. So everybody, please feel free to reach out to us at nocd.com or download the NoCD app at Google Play or iOS. And if anybody wants to call in, if you're in the UK, +44 1495 708 766. All right. Let's go down to, let's see. Shelby says, panic attacks are OCD. No, but they are not OCD. But panic attacks can occur along with OCD. Panic attacks are not actually diagnosable. You know, like even panic disorder is the occurrence of panic attacks along with a couple of other things too. So panic attack can happen with any kind of anxiety-based disorder as well, just so you know. All right, let me see. Jacob says, can I get intrusive thoughts about my OCD? Sure, why not? Recently, I've been doing a lot of research about OCD and whether or not a specific thought is intrusive. Is doing research a compulsion? Yes, it is. So in this kind of situation, 100% yes, it is, just so you know. Lily says, you're a legend, mate. You helped me through so much. Well, thanks, Lily. Oh my gosh, that's 2 things today that have just made my day. Lily, awesome you. Thanks for being here, Lily. And then she says, how do you deal with a link between OCD and Cptsd? Maybe you just meant PTSD. Does ERP combat both together? Can it work? Stop them merging and bringing up scenarios on repeat. Yeah. So Lily, one thing that we've seen is there are people who have been through some kind of traumatic experience who then develop obsessive compulsive disorder. And the OCD this is where OCD is a bit of an opportunistic jerk in this whole situation, because OCD will say, hey, wow, you had something really horrible and awful happen. Guess what? I have a way to make sure that never happens again. You just do what I tell you to do. We're going to introduce checking and researching and seeking reassurance and avoiding and all of those things. And then I'm going to keep this reminder constantly going in your head that this bad, awful, horrible thing has happened to you. And with me reminding you constantly of that and you doing all of these safety behaviors, that should eliminate the chance of that thing ever happening again. Now, here's what I want everyone to recognize, and sometimes the problem in this scenario. All of that is focused on the fact that something awful or horrible happened, which, let's acknowledge, happens to people, okay? I'm not taking that away from anyone. But what it doesn't focus on is the fact that you survived it. Now, maybe not as well as you would have liked. Maybe you look back and think you wish you would have done something different or something like that. But I do want to acknowledge for all of you the fact that something that most people never actually think about, and that is the fact that I did survive the experience, okay? And I want everyone to give a little pat on the back to yourself for having potentially survived something that was really difficult. Now, our job as therapists is to help you get through it in an even better way so that you really can move toward that life, living that life that you want to live without that influence of OCD or that trauma constantly flashing back or being in nightmares or something of that nature with you as well. Mehmet says these webinars are lifesavers, big time help since you don't have many specialists in your area. Awesome. Well, thanks. Glad to hear that. Swagsim says you love ERP and the NoCD app. It's helped you. Great. You don't understand why we need diagnosis for everything. And sometimes it concerns me how much people identify with a diagnosis. I would just say this. Here's my thought on diagnosis. I don't want to define anybody as a diagnosis. I just want to make sure people are meeting criteria for the thing that I'm going to be treating them for. So I look at it that way, Swexon. So I hope that that's helpful. When I know that you've got this or that, there's a few things to potentially differentiate too, and treatment might be slightly different as that's the case. So that's why I just like to do it that way and why we work that way. Sarah says, can OCD be contagious? Not that no one's ever sneezed and passed on OCD to someone else, as far as I can tell. I've never seen that happen. Now, that being said, you might think about it from a genetics point of view. Is there genetic links in families? There can be, right? That if someone has OCD, there could be a higher potential of OCD in other family members because maybe there's some genetic things going on, but that's not contagious, right? In that kind of sense, that's more genes, right? Genes aren't contagious. Genes are just kind of there. So, Sarah, we don't see any kind of contagion with OCD really happening. Now, the other thing that people might bring up is PANS, Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychological Syndrome associated with Streptococcal infection. That's PANDAS, or PANS is Pediatric Neurological Psychological Syndrome. So Pediatric autoimmune. I forgot the autoimmune. Sorry. Now, those things could be things that people could catch, right? Like strep throat or Lyme disease or something, which could lead to potentially some experiences that are like OCD or like Tourette's or something like that as well too. But that's in getting it. Now, you also say there, can our OCD be contagious? Again, if OCD is not contagious, then a subtype won't be contagious either, just so you know. Mm-hmm. Carol says, is it possible that OCD could make one feel like they can't separate from their mate? Must be around my mate 24/7, can't leave the mate. If leave the mate, you think he is cheating and drives away. That makes you anxious. Yep, Carol, that could absolutely be there, right? That's a reassurance seeking that as long as I know where you're at, then I don't have to worry that you're doing something that my OCD tells me that you might be doing, and I don't have to worry about it. So absolutely, Carol, I would say that is a safety behavior. For sure. And so the goal would be working with a therapist who can help you with putting more and more time away from your mate so that you learn how to handle that. And you recognize that just because those worst case scenarios pop in your head don't have to mean that they're actually true, right? So we can get to there. Alicia says, I don't know if I have OCD, but you've been struggling with the symptoms for years. How do I know for sure that I have it? Can speaking to an OCD therapist help me understand whether or not it is? Yes, absolutely, Alicia. We would be more than happy to meet with you, and we could kind of tell you what it is that's going on and what you're meeting. So if you want to reach out to us again at nocd.com, or if you're in the UK, +44 1495 708 766, we would be more than happy to chat with you to talk about obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay. And Michael says, you've been working with NoCD. Awesome. You're living with uncertainty. Okay. You notice that your anxiety is much worse. How long before you expect to see a shift? Yeah. Well, Michaelea, Michaelea. Forgot the A. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a really, really great question. And we do see things often get worse before they get better. So, Michael, first of all, congratulations, because this says to me that you are actually trying to live with uncertainty. If you're feeling worse, it means you're not giving into compulsions. Now, this is a bit of a waiting game then, Michael, that you're going to do between you and your OCD, because your OCD is going to try to win here and try to sneak in a safety behavior. And I want you to be steadfast and strong and not doing that. And over time, you will find that OCD likely is going to kind of relent and say, okay, fine, she's not going to do that, so I don't have to spend time on it. I can't give you an exact amount of time. I wish, believe me, I wish that I could. I totally wish that I could give you that exact amount of time. I don't have the ability to predict it, but I do want to congratulate you, Michael, on the fact that you are doing it. And that is awesome. So a round of applause for you, Michael. Congratulations. Sitting in your discomfort, living with your discomfort, and allowing that to be there. And it also can depend on length of time someone's had OCD. If you've had it for a very long time, it could be harder to give up than if you haven't had it for a very long time. So that can play a role in some of this as well too. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining me. And let me tell you, what a fun time. I think we might have to do more of these afternoon ones so that we can hit more parts of the world joining in on the webinar. So if you liked this, please at the end here, leave it in the comments. If you think we should continue doing this, I would love to hear your opinions on that. And that would be totally awesome if we could hear from you, if you think that we ought to continue this again. Once again, our webinar today brought to you by NoCD. Feel free to reach out to us at nocd.com. And remember, got some holiday specials going on for therapy. If you're outside of the US, give us a call. Talk to us about how we can make therapy a little bit cheaper for you now around the holiday time. And thanks for joining, everyone. We'll see you again soon. And remember, we're still doing the Wednesday night webinar tonight as well for those of you who want to join on that one also. So all the best to everybody. For those of you celebrating Thanksgiving, have an awesome one. Oh, it's fall. And for those of you who aren't celebrating Thanksgiving, be awesome anyway. All right. Talk to you soon.